Hi, this is Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I am Siofra Bradigan. So today I thought we should start talking about some of the different celestial bodies that we work with, and the moon seemed like a pretty clear, good first start. So today we're going to talk about the moon, and I want to cover some science as well as magic in the video because understanding what's happening to the moon and how it works is not a bad idea. So the way we are organized as a planet with our celestial body, the moon, we're going around the sun, which is what indicates the seasons, the equinoxes and the solstices and so forth, and then the moon is going around us, which is pretty obvious. But the moon, the way our moon is situated, it basically faces the sun all the time. That's kind of it wants to look at the sun. So from an energetic perspective, you can think of the sun and the moon as, being like lovers always looking at one another. So they're always gazing into one another's eyes. And then the earth gets in between at some points and on the other side behind it. So the moon, since it's always looking at the sun, say the earth is over here, when the moon is between the sun and the earth, that's when we can't see it because all the light is bouncing from the moon's surface back to the sun, and we're over here unable to see that wonderful dance between them. And then as the moon moves around, more of it becomes visible until it's on the opposite side of the earth, and then the sun and the moon looking at each other, we see the full face of the moon, and then it keeps on going around like that. And so that's why we see the different phases of the moon. And I'm sure most of you know this, but it's good to keep it in mind because it helps you to figure out exactly what's happening and what phase the moon might be in. The only time the moon is actually in the sky all night is during the full moon. The rest of the time it's out partially during the day, and during a new moon, when you can't see it, it's out during the entire day, but we don't see that it's there because we can't see its reflection, so it's sort of invisible to us. So the way science and witches both look at the moon, it has not just the obvious two phases like new moon and full moon, but it has phases in between. So there's actual 8 phases for the moon. And if you start at the new moon, from the scientific point of view, that's when the moon is between the sun and the earth, so we can't see it. A lot of magical traditions call this the dark of the moon instead of the new moon. And it can get confusing when you're looking at instructions and directions and so forth for doing different rituals or spells or so forth. So keep that in mind, that if it says new moon and it's just a magical thing, look at what the spell actually is asking you to do to figure out if it's supposed to be on the dark of the moon or a scientific new moon or not. So you've got the new moon or the dark of the moon, and then the waxing crescent as the moon starts to move into view is what a lot of which is called the new moon, because then you can see it and it's like a brand new thing. It's just been born into the sky. And this is where most of the confusion comes in, because we have 2 different things that we mean when we say new moon. One is the dark of the moon and the other is the beginning of the waxing crescent. So then there's the first quarter of the moon, so it's getting larger now. We can see half of its face. And then what they call waxing gibbous, and gibbous just means like oblong or odd-shaped kind of thing. And so it's not full, but there's a lot more of it. And then you go to the full moon, and once it hits the full moon and starts to come back around, then you've got the waning phases of the moon. So you got waning gibbous, and then you've got the last quarter. So we had the first quarter and the last quarter, the waning crescent, and then you're back to the new moon or the dark of the moon. And so you think about the energy that this is. It's like there's all this energetic connection going between the moon and the sun. And the moon obviously affects our gravitational pull and the tides of the planet. Water is coming up and going down, and when it's either on the new moon or on the full moon, the tides are going to be higher and lower because the pull is between the moon and the sun is greater. And so, you've got that happening every day, all the time. So then they start throwing other moon things at us. So blue moon is out there all over the place. And a lot of times, especially when people are first beginning, they hear a blue moon and they're not sure what that means. Basically, there are now two definitions of a blue moon. The first one that everybody used was the blue moon is the second full moon in a calendar month. So since it takes the moon like 29 and a half days to go through all of its phases, and all of our months except for February are longer than 29 and a half days, they're 30 to 31 days, there's going to be a time when you have a full moon like on the first of the month, and then you have a full moon on the 30th of the month or the 31st of the month, depending on the time of day and depending on where you live on the planet. Sometimes you have to remember that other people live on different parts of our Earth, and so the full moon can be on a different day before or after the one that you're working with. So when you're looking at your times and checking them, always make sure you're looking for your hemisphere and your continent. And it's better if you look for your city so you know exactly when your moon is going to be full for you. So this having a second full moon in a calendar month really doesn't mean anything at all. It's just an artificial thing where we've decided we're dividing the year up into 12 parts that are uneven anyway, and then we're going to count the full moons, and usually there's 13 full moons in a year. It's not always, but it's pretty common to have 13 full moons in a year. So the chances of having one fall twice in a month is pretty good. It's not a special magical event. It's just another full moon, which is a magical event by itself. It doesn't have to have anything else attached to it. It's just another full moon. So when you see all those memes out there on Facebook saying, oh my God, we're having a powerful blue moon happening, and be ready, hold on to your socks. It's a full moon. That's what it is. They have now come up with a second definition of a blue moon, and that is the third full moon in a season that has 4 full moons. So I don't know if it's accurate or not. I mean, if it's true that in ancient cultures they knew how often the moon was going to come, and the seasons are solstice to equinox, equinox to solstice, solstice to equinox, and equinox to solstice. So in between that period of time, if they could calculate that there were going to be 4 full moons during that season, the third one was called blue. Why they picked the third one, I have no idea. So again, though, it's a full moon. It doesn't mean anything else except for the fact that it is a full moon. It might mean in ancient times that depending on which season you got the extra full moon in, you could get more hunting done at night, or something, other activity that's done by the light of the moon. Maybe that would make it special in that sense. But from a magical point of view, it really doesn't have any significance, at least not to me. So then science has decided to add other things like super to moons. And so a supermoon, basically, the moon's orbit's not exactly round. So it's not like a perfect circle around the planet. It comes in close, it goes out far, and it shifts over time. So at some points in time, the full moon can be closer to the Earth than other full moons. And so when the orbit of the Earth is closer, or the orbit of the moon is closer to the Earth, the moon is bigger from our perspective because it's actually closer. And so NASA decided to call it super because it is pretty super. It's really nice. But again, it's a full moon. It just means that it's closer to us in orbit. And now they're calling micro moons because they're farther away. So remember when you're looking at this. Okay, so on top of all of this, they've decided to start adding new phrases for the new moon or the dark of the moon. So now they have a black moon, which the first time that happened, the internet just completely went crazy. I mean, people were just running around like chickens with their heads cut off thinking, oh my God, it's a black moon. What does that mean? It's just another new moon. But again, same definition. A black moon is the second new moon in the calendar month or the third new moon in the season. They happen regular like clockwork. And this is all human civilization, calendar workings and stuff like this, and artificial systems that we've created that we've laid over top of this event that happens on a regular basis and has been happening like that for millennia. And do your best to just sort of ignore that part and work with the moon. So that's that. I had to make notes because there's all this stuff. So then there's the astrology associated with the moon. Of course, as the year progresses and we go through our 12 astrological signs, the new moon and the full moon are in different signs as they go around. And it's interesting to note that, say, the January new moon that happens in Capricorn, of course the Capricorn new moon can happen in December because they don't match the months. They kind of straddle the months. So you're going from like the 20th to the 22nd of one month to the 20th to the 22nd of the next month. So you could have a Capricorn new moon in December. If it was in Capricorn, the new moon is always in the sign of the astrological sign that it's in. So in Aquarius, the new moon would be an Aquarius new moon, and then the full moon is the exact opposite. So like in Capricorn, if the new moon is Capricorn, the full moon is Leo. So you take the 6 months and you flip it, and it goes along like that because as the moon is traveling around the planet, it goes through the different astrological signs. About every 2 to 2.5 days or so, it passes through a sign, and it starts in that astrological sign on the new moon that it's in, and then travels all the way back through it to the next one. So for those of you who are into astrology, that would be what's happening there. So I'm not an astrologer, so don't take my word for any of that. But that part I know about as far as the moon goes. So whenever you're going to be doing some kind of magic, it's good to figure out if you're going to do it with a celestial body like the moon. You want to know what its associations are so that you can kind of tune your ritual or your spell work or whatever to that particular body. So like this is my lunar wand. I showed it to you briefly when we were talking about different kinds of energy, because planetary energy, lunar energy are parts of that. And I used moonstone, and I have 13 moonstones to represent the 13 lunar moons in a year. And I have a tube of silver on the inside of this willow, and willow is associated with the moon because of its water content, and the moon is associated with water. And so and silver is its metal probably because of its reflective nature. And the moon light seems more silver, where sunlight seems more yellow, which is why the sun is associated with gold. So you've got the silver inside filled with moonstone chips and moonstones on the outside, and then I charged it up and dedicated it to the moon. I did it this way because this way I have the different colors of moonstone on here. Because moon phases go from, like, you can't see it, so it's black, all the way up to it being white. And moonstone is wonderful because it comes in all these different shades and different colors and stuff like that. So it gave me a way to sort of get both the number of full moons in a cycle, as well as the different phases of the moon that it might go through and the different colors and stuff like that. That was me. You don't have to do that. The number for the moon is actually 9. So there's we're pretty familiar with most people know about the goddesses of the moon, like Artemis, Diana, Selene, which is what selenite, which is this stuff here, is named for. And originally in ancient times, selenite was actually what they called moonstone because it kind of looks like moonlight got trapped in this stone. And so they named it after Selene, goddess of the moon, so that's why it's called selenite. And its interesting properties are it's a natural fiber optic substance. You can actually shine a light through one end and it'll come out the other and hit the wall on the other side of the room. So it makes like a beam, straightens out the light and beams it across the room. So selenite makes a wonderful thing to work with during the moon. And it comes in a lot of forms. This is a larger one I use sometimes, but I have like a tower, so it like lights up that way. You can put a light under it if you want and have it spinning, which is kind of cool looking. And then we have one up in our temple that's like a circle sandwich. How would you, sort of an oval and fatter in the middle than the end. So I don't know exactly what to call that shape, but
like lens.
Like a lens.
Whatever the word is, lenticular, I think.
Well, whatever it is, it comes in a lot of shapes because it's pretty easy to use. So, and then there's goddesses. The triple goddess, the maiden, mother, crone, is usually associated with the moon. The maiden being the new crescent, the mother being the full moon, and the crone being the dark of the moon. So, it's like youthful energy, growing, coming up into things, fullness of time and knowing your worth, and then aging and fading away. And so, that's not a specific name there's different cultures that have names for each of the phases. Hecate is one of the names that they use for the dark of the moon. So she's one of the goddesses of the dark of the moon. And you can do your own research and find a lot of that kind of stuff out. So we're not going to be trying to tell you all the different names of all the different goddesses of the moon. And there's a bunch of gods of the moon too, so it isn't just goddesses, depending on the culture. There are, the Mesopotamians, they have a god of the moon called Sin, and the Germans have a god of the moon called Mani. The Japanese have a god of the moon called Tsukiyomi. I'm not sure how to pronounce that correctly. And the Egyptians have got Ibis, Khonsu, and Thoth. All of them are associated with the moon. And other of their deities or gods are also associated with the moon, but in a more complex way. They're not like pure, as it were. So when you're figuring out what kind of magic you want to do with a lunar cycle, and as an addition, I can tell you how to plant with the moon, because I thought that was sort of interesting. I used to do that a lot. On the new moon, or the dark of the moon, that's a time, since it's new, that's a time to do work on beginnings, opportunities, things that you want to begin and start over, wiping the slate clean, love and friendship, new relationships with people. And this is the time, if you're planting by the moon, that you plant seeds in the ground, and then as the moon grows in the sky and comes to full, the seeds sprout and are pulled up by the power of the moon, just like the water's affected by it, and go in an upward direction. So when the moon is waxing, which means it's getting fuller, it's going from not much there to the fullness, towards the fullness. Think about how, what that means. That is, the light is it's increasing, things are getting more. So growing things like the plants, growing things in your life, success, abundance, healing, love, money, spells that are related to that kind of thing. Or just, thinking about an attribute in yourself that you're trying to nurture, that you can start working on it on a new moon and plant that seed in yourself that you want it to nurture, and then continue to nurture it through the phases of the moon and allow it to blossom and let it pull itself out of you. So when the moon is full, that's actually for planting. As the moon is beginning to fade from full, right at that cusp right there, is when you plant root vegetables and stuff. Because then as the moon wanes, it pulls the root down into the earth. And I've actually seen this work pretty well. It's also when you want to weed your garden or cut your hair if you don't want it to grow. It makes things like the weeds won't come back as fast if you weed when the moon is waning right after the full moon, and hair won't grow as fast if you cut it right after the full moon. If you want it to grow, then you cut it at the new moon, and that energy is supposed to help make your hair grow back in. So that's something to think about. But on the full moon, that's all, the different rituals that different groups do. If they're going by the moon, there's usually something on the new moon, dark of the moon, or the crescent moon, new moon, and something on the full moon. So depending on what kind of path you're following, what kind of magic that you do, you're going to associate more maybe with one phase or another, or you're going to try and use them all. But the full moon is when everybody likes to make their moon water, which has become a huge thing now, where you put your water in a container and put it out in the moonlight and let the moonlight sort of get absorbed, the energy from that reflected light get absorbed into the water, and then you use that for yourself. And depending on the astrological sign that the moon is in, it's supposed to have different properties. It's another whole thing in itself. But, lover's moon, people associate the full moon both with love and with madness. That's where the term lunacy comes from. And the anecdotal story is about people going crazy on the full moon because it pulls our emotions. We're more emotionally vulnerable and potentially emotionally volatile when the moon is full, just because of that extra light, that different kind of light, and that pull that we get when we see it. And I have to say, some of the most magical things I've ever seen have been when the sky is perfectly clear and there's a really bright full moon, and it is so bright that it actually casts shadows. I had a drive once through the Rockies up in British Columbia where the moon was full like that, and it's like you don't see shadows at night that often, and it's just very magical. And it seems that fairies like to come out during the full moon, as well as rabbits. Interestingly enough, rabbits will come out of their holes on a full moon and jump around in a field. And I've actually seen that happen, so it's actually a real thing. And of course, animals are also pulled by the moon. Coyotes and wolves will howl at the moon because there's just something about it that activates that energetic connection that they have as well. So the full moon is good for love and healing and protection and intuition, your dreams, connecting with different deities, the gods and goddesses, your ancestors, reaching your fullest potential, letting yourself become that, doing water magic. Things associated with your feelings and emotions are very powerful during a full moon. Scrying, your clairvoyant ability. It's like there's something about that light that is not a harsh light. Like the sun, the light is so strong you can't see anything but it. But moonlight is soft and giving, or there's just something about it that's different, and it lets your eyes relax. You don't squint in moonlight. You can't get a sunburn or a moonburn. Although I read some people were worried about that, and I wondered about our intelligence as a species. But anyway, so because of that shift in light and ability to see in a way that we don't see very often, that's a lot of times people will experience ghosts, spirits, fairy folk, see things that are often hidden in the bright light of day, kind of thing. And so it can be very interesting, exploratory. Some people might find it scary. I find it fascinating. I always enjoy seeing things that other people don't see. That's me. I'm used to that. And and then when the moon starts to shrink again and it starts to go away, you can put things into the lunar sphere when the moon is starting to shrink, and then have that energy of the apparent shrinkage of that light diminish whatever it is you're trying to get rid of. So if you're trying to get rid of a habit, like a bad habit you've decided you don't like, or an illness or an addiction that you have, a bad relationship, it's a good time to do cord cuttings and keep your distance from someone who is not good for you to be around, someone you want to eliminate from your life sphere. And releasing things, cleansing yourself, those kinds of rituals are good for that time. And so, the tides are certainly one of the things that the moon affects a great deal. And when it comes to like waxing and waning, which is the terms that we use for the moon, it also applies to the tides. So I figure if I'm in the need of doing a specific kind of working that I would need one of the specific phases of the moon to do, but the moon is not in the right phase for me, I can look up the tide table and I can figure out what's happening as far as the planetary waters are concerned. So if the tide is going out, I can do things that I might do on a waning or moon. If the tide is coming in, there's things that I can do that I might do on a waxing or full moon. And so you can time those things that way. You don't have to wait for the specific lunar cycle in order to do moon-like magic. I guess that would be a way of putting it. Anyway, one of the things that helped me start to get more in touch with the lunar sphere in the beginning especially was what I would call taking a moon bath. And it's an interesting experience. I managed to have, at one of the houses that I lived at, I had a big cast iron tub, one of those nice big deep ones, and it had a window in it that the full moon shone right through. And so I would go into the bathroom and turn out all the lights, sometimes have a candle, sometimes not. Would get in the water and sort of charge the water up, and then bathe in the moonlight and sing to the moon, talk to the moon, feel the moon, talk to a goddess of the moon. These are all processes that we do to attune our energy to a specific kind of energy to work with. And that reaches parts of yourself that you don't know are there. It allows them to come out of their little hiding hole or whatever and spread their wings and become that. And you can add things to your water. You're making a bath of moon water, basically, I guess, when you're doing that and you're bathing in it, which has got to be a great thing to do when you can. Um, and just like connect with the unconscious of yourself. Connect with those hidden parts of yourself that are often too busy, that you're too busy to pay attention to because you're out in the day and you have errands to run, you have things to do, you have people to see, talk to. This is a good time to take just for yourself and to just be with yourself and to see inside yourself and experience that. Because that's what this is about at its core, getting to know yourself and expanding your ability to experience different aspects of your personality and your energy and of reality. So, that's a little bit about the moon, and I'm sure there's way much more about the moon, but this is just sort of like a basic introduction into lunar energy, and good luck finding more. I'm sure there's lots out there, and I hope that you enjoy the full moon that's coming up soon, on the 13th actually, where we'll be doing our amethyst recharging and stuff like that, which is one of the things that we do with the full moon at this point. And if you are doing that with us, I welcome your energy. So this is Siofra Bradigan, and this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove. Blessed be.